Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today is a very special day because I'm finally having a weekend away, and like with any watch enthusiast who's going to be travelling, it's all important, I think, to of course take a GMT watch. So this is going to be a great opportunity for me to really test the Venezianico Nereide GMT. This here is the watch in question, and as you can see I've gone for a sort of silver and rose gold colourway. And I think this is quite interesting and a little bit different. So aside from giving the watch a thorough review across my trip to New York, I'll also be asking the question, do you really need a true GMT? My idea with this one is to set the GMT hand as New York time and leave the local hour and minute hands as Calgary time, where I'm going to be flying from. So the downside with this that I know straight away is that the date is tied to the hour and minute hand. So therefore, when it hits midnight in New York with the GMT hand, the date is still going to be yesterday until Calgary catches up. Anyway, with that all said, let's get to New York. Well, this wouldn't be a review without taking a more detailed look at the watch and talking through the specifications and the finishing. This is a 316L stainless steel construction, it's 39mm in diameter, it's a 45.5mm lug to lug, so it will fit nicely on smaller wrists, that's for sure. The movement is of course the Seiko NH34 GMT, which is not a true GMT, but an office GMT. The crystal is sapphire glass, it does have some anti-reflective coating on there. There's BGW9 on the hands and in the applied indices. The bezel itself is a glass bezel insert, this one with the grey and the rose gold, which plays nicely in the light, as you'll see later on. It's 120 click and it's unidirectional, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's 200 meters water resistant, it's got a screw down crown, and Venezianico call this a Canova bracelet. I would call it a H-link bracelet, and it's got brushed outers and polished inner links. Looking a little bit closer at the dial, on this colourway it's like a sunburst silver, and the indices and the hands are all finished in rose gold. And you'll see the GMT hand is painted with the grey, which matches the first half of the bezel, and the rose gold colouring that's used matches perfectly on the second half of the bezel. And matching the bezel colour accurately is such an easy mistake for watch brands to make, and I see it time and time again. So I'm really grateful that Venezianico have been able to get these colours bang on between the dial and the bezel insert. On the finishing on the head of the watch, you've got very fine brushing on the sides, and then on the top of the lugs is a nice polishing, which matches that of the polishing on the centre links on the bracelet. So it does kind of come together quite nicely. The crown is very nicely finished, it's got a strong knurling on it, and the Venezianico logo on display, as you can see, very prominently. And the case back of the watch is beautiful. It's a really nice globe engraved with the world times all around the outside. The end link fit is very nice to the case. The crown operation is really smooth, it's really easy to grip despite the fact that this is a slightly smaller watch. And in terms of operation, it's as good as you're going to get from an NH34 movement. The clicks are pronounced, the threading is great, I have no qualms. Operating the bezel, the clicks are quite loud, but they are crisp, which I know some people prefer, and everything is well aligned. Something to note about the bracelet is that the edges are all very smooth. Despite the fact that there isn't an obvious chamfer on them, everything has been deburred and cleaned up to a state where it feels silky smooth, and that's something else that you're paying for when you look at some of the cheaper offerings from AliExpress and micro brands versus some of the more expensive ones, especially with the NH movements. It's that extra level of finishing and that extra level of feel that you're only going to notice when you have the watch in your hand. And that concludes our more detailed look at the watch. So let's get back to the streets of New York. So welcome to New York and welcome to Central Park. It's only been a short trip, but I thought it was a great opportunity to use the Venezianico and take advantage of the GMT function. Had a fantastic day yesterday looking around the Intrepid Museum, seeing all the aircraft. I've put some footage in for you, and it was super comfortable for most of the day. But one of the issues that I have with the Venezianico in terms of comfort is that there is no half links provided with the Canova bracelet. And when you have a butterfly clasp and you have no spring-loaded system, no quick adjustment and no half links, I think it can be difficult with the fit. So I'm wearing the watch slightly tighter than I normally would because of the lack of half links provided. And although you can buy them online with Venezianico store, I think they should be provided with the watch as standard. Maybe mine being one that I bought last year when it first came out, they weren't provided, but I think they should. And again, some form of like spring-loaded butterfly clasp would help massively if you can't have quick adjust, which is uncommon in butterfly clasp. So I think that would really solve the issues, but it has still been comfortable. I think 39mm for me with a 17.5cm wrist is the perfect size for the head of the watch, and the weight is reasonably light, and so in that regard it has been absolutely a success. In terms of the design, overall, like I said, I think this is something a little bit different, especially in this colorway, and for a collector with a lot of different watches, it's something that can maybe stand out a little bit, and this is something that I really like with Venezianico. And as a brand, I feel they do have their own design language. In terms of timekeeping, obviously this is the NH34, so nothing fancy, relatively agricultural, but rock solid. And this one, yeah, keeping good time. I'll put it on the time grapher when I get home, but having worn it for several days in a row, it's still pretty much bang on, so absolutely no issues there. Lume is pretty good on this one. For a GMT watch, the Seiko 5 GMT still has better lume. I think it's always difficult with the BGW9 with the blue, it always looks a little bit dimmer than the green tones, but even so, I think they could put a few more layers on as one improvement for the watch. The bezel we've spoken about, so yes, it is a ratcheted 120 click unidirectional bezel, like with the dive style. I prefer this to a friction bezel, but an ideal in this kind of watch, and the improvement I would make would be to have a clicking bidirectional bezel, and I think that would be fantastic. Now, how has it been using the GMT function for local time here in New York, leaving the default time set to Calgary, where I flew out from? So it's been something that I've taken a little while to get used to, but I'm quite enjoying using it in this way. I've had the Glycine Airman, and I've also had a Vostok before that was basically working on 24-hour, so one single rotation for the 24 hours just to tell the time anyway. So it's not uncommon for me to use a watch in this way, and having that GMT hand slaved to the outer bezel and using that as local time, yeah, it's been fine. And I'm looking forward, so when I fly back, I can just switch that back to GMT so I can track the time back at home, and I haven't then changed the time, the local time for Canada. And I think having an office GMT and using it in this way kind of negates the problem. Obviously a true GMT is something that we can all appreciate, but I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. And I think it's really overhyped in the watch world, and we often think we need things that we don't actually need. And true GMT is nice, but it's absolutely not essential. I think if you were traveling constantly, all the time, every day, different time zones, different countries, I could justify it. But a cooler GMT for somebody who's going on the occasional trip and the occasional travel, really, it's not that much of an issue. And welcome back to Canada. So, in conclusion with the video, I wanted to just finalize a couple of thoughts about the brand and the watch, and another improvement that I think can be made to the watch. So something that I noticed about the watch during my trip is that sometimes the time is not so easy to read, and a part of this is due to the colorway that I picked. Of course, having sort of silver and rose gold, it's not the most legible, but looking at the watch and the proportions of it, I do think if you widened the hands and the indices probably about 20% to keep everything in proportion with each other, it would just make everything that little bit more legible. And you especially notice this with the GMT hand, which obviously I was using in New York. It's very, very small, and you do have to look quite hard when you're on the go and just glancing to actually see what the time is. Something else I wanted to mention, which I know is going to come up in the comments, is, oh my gosh, that's $550 US for an NH34. And as you'll know, I've looked at an NH34 powered watch that cost $100 from AliExpress. So, is this worth 5 times the price? Yes, I think it is. The fit, the finish, the brand, the support that you get from the brand, I think it's absolutely worth it. This is a unique design. A lot of the parts on this are unique to Venezianico. If you have any issues, Venezianico Club on Facebook is a great resource. The founders are in there, they'll answer questions, they take suggestions, they improve, they learn things from the people buying their watches, they'll answer your questions, and you can have direct contact with the brand owners. And I think all of this combined, especially the fit and finish being the main thing, it does somewhat justify the asking price. Although, I will point out, there is normally some offers around or some discount codes, so if you're interested, I'd sign up to the mailing list on there, and there's a good chance that you might be able to get somewhere between 10 and 20% discount on the watches. Another point which may come up is with the brand itself. So Venezianico was Meccaniche Veneziani. Again, apologies to any Italian listeners for my pronunciations. When they first launched on Kickstarter quite a few years ago, I think the fit and the finish and the quality of the product wasn't quite there, but it was obviously the start of the brand. Once they'd been established for a couple of years, I bought 2 Meccaniche Veneziani watches. One dress watch, one dive watch, and they were really good watches. I didn't have any major issues with them, but some of the finishing, especially on the crown, was a little bit sharp and left a little bit to be desired, but they were good watches. More recently, they rebranded, and they are obviously Venezianico now. And this is where I purchased this watch, and I also purchased one of the skeleton watches in the 42mm. And both of these, you can feel that this is a mature brand. Everything I think is spot on now. I've had no complaints with either watch. Both of them have arrived absolutely perfect. And I can wholeheartedly say, having had 4 watches now in total from essentially the same company under 2 names, they've matured a lot and they've polished the rough edges, and they're at a point now where I can wholeheartedly recommend them. I'd love to hear about any experiences you have with the brand, with the product, or any thoughts on the video. And as always, if you like what you see, please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, or you'll probably never see anything anyway. And it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.